Dear colleagues, we have completed our visit to Qatar, where we held meetings with the Emir of Qatar and with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is also the chairman of the government of QAD. We have long-standing and good relations. Today, the mood for their worldwide development was confirmed on the basis of the agreements that were reached during previous contacts between President Putin and the Emir of Qatar. And today we also talked about continuing meetings at different levels on various issues. The next tasks are to hold the next meeting of the Intergovernmental Commission on Trade and Economic Cooperation. It is scheduled for next month in Moscow. We are also going to have contacts between foreign ministries, and we always keep in mind the possibility of holding high-level meetings. There is such interest on both sides. We have agreed to intensify work in all areas, primarily in the trade and economic sphere, in the energy sector, within the framework of organizations such as the Gas Exporting Countries Forum located in Iran, and in other areas of our economic cooperation, including cooperation between the Qatar Investment Agency and the Russian Direct Investment Fund. There are many plans for humanitarian exchanges, encouragement of tourist trips, and other cultural events. We have talked a lot and in detail about Middle Eastern affairs, first of all from the point of view of the process that is unfolding in the Syrian Arab Republic after the change of power. We are interested in ensuring that this process does not get out of control, does not lead to internecine strife. Because such risks remain, there are still clashes between different groups. After a new government was established in Damascus and many parts of the Syrian territory, show such a desire to separate themselves from the central authorities. This applies not only to the Kurds, who for many years under the Biden administration nurtured ideas of separatism, which is categorically unacceptable for all countries in the region, since it can lead to a big war. But also other ethno-confessional groups are not averse to taking advantage of the current situation to assert their rights to a certain autonomy, in order to somehow streamline these processes and direct them in a single direction. The Syrian authorities recently held the entire Syrian National Congress, at which, as they announced, all political, ethno-confessional forces of Syria were represented. A declaration was adopted, which positively calls for further work to be carried out transparently, with the participation of all groups that represent Syrian society, and would ensure the creation of conditions for socio-economic development, overcoming difficult problems that were inherited primarily as a result of unilateral suffocating sanctions that the United States and the Europeans imposed against the government of Bashar al-Assad.
которые Соединенные Штаты и европейцы ввели против правительства Башара Асада. Мы, кстати,
The United Nations has called for all these sanctions to be lifted immediately.
все эти санкции были сняты.
They did not hit Bashar al-Assad and his government, but the Syrian people, and they continue to do the same already under a government that the West considers more acceptable than the previous government.
Запад, в общем-то, считает более приемлемой, чем предыдущее правительство.
We will raise this issue and seek the lifting of these unilateral sanctions without any conditions, because the Europeans tried to make demands of such a kind that any relaxation in the sanctions regime should involve the expulsion of Russia from the Syrian Arab Republic.
Любое послабление в санкционном режиме должно предполагать вышвыривание России из Сирийской Арабской Республики.
This is the same mentality that has distinguished Europe lately, either with us or against us. So there were cases with the preparation of the ground in order to tear Ukraine away from Russia, so it was in many other situations. This mentality has a very detrimental effect on any processes everywhere. Europe is now in the same Ukraine. We talked about this today with the MEM and with the minister. The alignment of political forces is changing in the same Ukraine, which was manifested during the vote in the United Nations. Europe immediately tries to undermine this trend, announces new large packages of military assistance to Kiev, encourages it to continue fighting actions, directly stating, as the Danish Prime Minister did, in my opinion, that in this situation, peace is worse than war for Ukraine, therefore Europe's role in inflating crises, and Europe's reputation in this field, which it has earned over many centuries of human development, remain quite in the same state. We are in favor of all external players, the Arabs, the West, China, Russia, and Iran, contributing to the normalization of the situation in Syria. And we know that the Syrian leadership, as confirmed to us by the Qatari interlocutors, is interested in promoting reforms and facilitating the process of normalizing the situation inside the country should proceed evenly, in a balanced manner, so that no one tries to subordinate these processes to their geopolitical goals. Syria no longer wants to be a territory where the geopolitical problems of external players are solved. And, of course, we have paid special attention to another topic, the situation in the Palestinian-Israeli settlement. In relations between Israel and Lebanon, we are very concerned that every day the Israeli army is taking additional steps that are not provided for by agreements with Hamas and with Lebanon, and which, in general, create facts on the ground that contradict agreements, contradict on Security Council resolutions on Palestinian affairs and on the Lebanese problem.
Договоренностям и противоречащие резолюциям Совета Безопасности ООН и по палестинским делам, и по ливанской проблеме.
In this regard, both Qatar and the Russian Federation share the need to translate the process into compliance with the principles approved by the UN Security Council. The issue of the creation of a Palestinian state is a key one, and if attempts are made to wind up these decisions of the Security Council and replace the creation of a Palestinian state with the resettlement of Palestinians in the region, it will only lay a time bomb, as this has happened more than once over many decades of ignoring the demands for a two-state solution.
Как это бывало не раз за долгие десятилетия игнорирования требований о двухгосударственном решении.
In this regard, Qatar and I will continue consultations. A very useful dialogue is taking place between Russia and the League of Arab States, within the framework of the existing joint format between us. Our experts discuss all the issues that require coordination on a daily basis, and we will use our opportunities in the international arena, including the United Nations, so that the processes go according to a constructive plan. This is not happening yet. We pin our hopes on the Conference of the League of Arab States, which they are convening in Cairo, and where the topic of the future of the Gaza Strip will be discussed in the context of those initiatives that were voiced, up to the transformation of it into a tourist zone.
В контексте вот тех инициатив, которые звучали, вплоть до превращения ее в туристическую зону,
The Arabs want the Palestinians' right to live on their land to be protected. This is what the summit will be dedicated to first of all. And on March 14th, a joint committee of the League of Arab States and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation will meet in Istanbul, which will also be devoted to approaches to the settlement of relations in the entire region. Israel-Palestine, Israel-Lebanon, Israel-Syria, because Israeli representatives, just as they decided to stay in southern Lebanon. Now the Israeli armed forces have entered the south of the Syrian Arab Republic. All this creates new situations and, of course, requires not just reflection, but some kind of constructive steps that take into account the interests of security and development of all countries in the region without exception, including, of course, Israel. But it is necessary to solve security and development issues, not at the expense of the security and development of others. That's probably where I'm going to stop. If you have any questions, please.
Sergey Viktorovich, this is an island that has made a lot of efforts so that children, entertained with their parents, enjoy the actions of Ukraine, could be reunited. How do you see the further mediation of personnel in the settlement of the Ukrainian problem? And one more question. How do you see further cooperation in the energy sector? SCA.
Today, we have once again expressed our gratitude to the world and to the Foreign Minister, the Prime Minister, gratitude for the efforts they are making without advertising, in a businesslike manner, to assist in resolving humanitarian issues between Russia and Ukraine, including, first of all, issues related to the return of children to their families. This work will continue. We were told about it very clearly today. We always welcome the initiatives that the countries of the region offer out of the best intentions. In addition to Qatar, both the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are working usefully here, and we consider this a manifestation of goodwill that benefits, first of all, specific people suffering from the conflict. As for other areas of assistance from Qatar, you know, we do not expect any special steps. We are waiting for our European colleagues to finally stop lying about the fact that Russia is blocking the negotiations. President Putin has repeatedly responded to these false statements, reminding that the Ukrainian leadership, first of all, instigated by Europe, refuses to negotiate. In addition to Zelensky's decree, which has already become a byword, which prohibits negotiations with the Russian Federation. In addition, every day we hear some statements that we do not need to sit down at the negotiating table now. We need to ensure superiority on the battlefield. In such a militant spirit, European countries are now promoting their hopelessly outdated, failed policy on Ukraine. Therefore, we proceed from the assumption that the best help from those who sincerely want to help resolve the conflict, is awareness of its causes, the root causes of this conflict. As President Trump did in his recent speeches, calling the expansion of NATO and the attempt to absorb Ukraine by the North Atlantic Alliance the biggest mistake of the Biden administration, and one of the key reasons for the outbreak of this conflict. And today, we have once again drawn attention to another egregious reason that the West has been silencing with all its might until recently, and now continues to be silenced. This is the course of the regime that came to power as a result of the state revolution to exterminate by adopting laws, to exterminate everything Russian in the field of education, mass media, and culture. And plus, the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church was recently banned. This is a direct violation of the UN Charter, which requires respect for human rights, including, above all, linguistic and religious rights. None of the Western representatives are talking about this. Therefore, the promotion of this truth, familiarization with the facts that we constantly cite, and understanding of these root causes will be the best contribution from any country to creating conditions for the settlement of this conflict in justice.
Со стороны любой страны наилучшим вкладом в создание условий для урегулирования этого конфликта по справедливости.
You had a question.
Energy. Cooperation in the field of energy.
With the boat, first of all, Qatar is one of the largest shareholders of Rosneft. This is already a steady process. Qatar, Doha is the headquarters of the Forum of Gas Exporting Countries, a very important structure that we value for ensuring harmony in the energy market and, in particular, natural gas.
Энергоносителей, ну и в частности природного газа.
There are projects in the line of cooperation between the Qatar Investment Agency and the Russian Direct Investment Fund. Perhaps projects worth almost $1 billion are being implemented there. Projects for a large amount are being considered for the future. It is quite possible to target some of these agreements to new forms of energy cooperation, but it is up to the relevant ministry and the company to decide.
Новые формы энергетического взаимодействия, но это уже решать профильным министерством и компанией.
As a result, the verdict with Trump said that they agreed that it was necessary to finally deploy European troops at the end of the conflict in Ukraine. The NACA stated that such a scenario is not being considered in Russia. Troops from such countries, if not NATO, in Russia are ready to consider in my capacity.
No, we can't consider any options. By the way, I do not know what Macron said there. He did not play his role very convincingly in Washington. But President Trump, when this topic was touched upon at a press conference, as I read, said that the decision to deploy peacekeeping forces was possible only with the consent of both sides, apparently meaning us and Ukraine. Nobody asks us about it. The approach that is being imposed by the Europeans, first of all by France, as well as by the British. It is aimed at what I have just mentioned, at heating up the conflict further and stopping any attempts to calm it down. Macron stated in Washington about the need for an urgent truce, the introduction of these peacekeeping forces, and then, they say, we will talk about territories, about the fate of people, about other principles of settlement. This is cunning. It is impossible to agree to an agreement that is aimed at achieving one single goal, to pump Ukraine with weapons again. On the 24th of February, a large delegation from Europe came and again announced the supply of weapons for many billions. When the United States introduces a resolution to urgently move to peace, Europe votes against it and then confirms by deeds that it does not want any peace, because its wards have not yet fulfilled their main tasks. These tasks are changing. Until recently, it was the infliction of a strategic defeat of Russia, which the European Union and NATO repeated like a spell every day. But now Macron in Washington said it was necessary to achieve a settlement that would not look like surrender. The guys navigate quickly, but not in everything. Therefore, there is talk of some kind of peacekeeping forces. It's all empty. The main thing there is to destroy the root cause of the conflict. They are not in the absence of peacekeeping forces, but not in what I said, in the involvement of Ukraine in the North Atlantic Alliance, with an eye to the development of its territory to create a military infrastructure aimed against Russia, and the total extermination of the rights of Russians and Russian speakers. Some say, well, there were ideas, let's leave the line of contact. Russian, and this is Ukrainian. First of all, this will not happen. We have a constitution based on the will of the people. And secondly, what remains of Ukraine should also be exempt from Russian laws. Russian is also where people stay who find it more convenient to speak Russian, and who want to preserve the traditions of their ancestors brought up in Russian culture. Therefore, it will not be possible to get rid of such simple mechanical things as the deployment of troops. It will be necessary to talk about the root causes.
Earlier I reported that Moscow is considering options in which its enchanted assets will be spent on the restoration of Ukraine, but on condition that part of it will not go to 2 or 4 new regions of the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions.
Who committed it?
Is he really considering such an opportunity, or will he seek the full return of his assets? And the second question will be able to. In Washington, the signing of the agreement is being prepared for the infidelity of metal, while a significant part of these resources is located on the territory of 4 new regions of Russia. During the meeting, in a subsequent consultation in the United States, whether the issue of the production of recreational flyers in these territories was discussed, and when Vladimir Putin invited American companies to mine on the territory of Russia, it was implied,
when the president or other press of the Russian leadership invites foreign investors to participate in projects on the territory of Russia, he means, of course, the entire territory of the Russian Federation in full compliance with its constitution. The issue was not touched upon or discussed at the meeting in Riyadh, but we talked about how this was actually emphasized in the telephone conversation between Presidents Putin and Trump. We talked about the need to remove artificial obstacles to the development of mutually beneficial economic and other ties, which representatives of relevant business structures in the United States are interested in the United States and in the Russian Federation.
Заинтересованы представители соответствующих бизнес-структур и в Соединенных Штатах и в Российской Федерации. Но это принцип.
In principle, to change an unhealthy, stupid situation that does not even allow conversations to be conducted between the 2 great leading powers.
Между двумя великими ведущими державами.
As for our assets, which were stolen primarily by the Europeans, no, there were no specific talks about this. But I have no doubt that this topic will not disappear anywhere as part of the settlement. This is natural.
Но то, что как часть урегулирования эта тема никуда не исчезнет, у меня нет никаких сомнений. Это естественно. Кстати,
Americans also understand this. Secretary of State Mark Rubio recently, yesterday, in my opinion, said that the issue of frozen, as he said, Russian assets should be considered, and considered in conjunction with the steps that were taken in response by the Russian Federation, and which affect the interests of American companies in this case.
и которые затрагивают интересы, в данном случае, американских компаний.
These are healthy reflections on the need to abandon thieving methods and not expect that they will remain unanswered. Another interesting remark of Macron, who said a lot of new things, in particular, he said, when asked about the same topic. He said that it was impossible to touch Russian assets seized in Europe because it would be a violation of international law.
Российские активы, потому что это будет нарушение международного права.
But the profit that they receive from these assets, it can be quite used for the needs of supporting the same Ukraine.
на нужды поддержки той же Украины.
We would like to ask your French colleagues to clarify in which international legal document it is allowed to use profits from what you stole.
Использовать прибыль с того, что ты своровал.
Viktorovich, you have already said that the Russian Americans are going to solve the issue with our embassies first of all. If some scheme was discussed on top of topics that are inconsistent with how they will be discussed, for example, what you said about Ruby, that he is ready to discuss the fate of the frozen. When can the issue of discussing this issue come up, and will Russia insist on the return of these paintings? This has nothing to do with the functioning of embassies. The issue of assets is a state-level issue. And we announced, as you said at the beginning, that our diplomats, high-level experts will meet and consider the systemic problems that have accumulated as a result of the illegal activities of the previous administration, to create artificial obstacles to the activities of the Russian embassies, to which we naturally reciprocated, and also created uncomfortable conditions for the work of the American embassy in Moscow.
По созданию искусственных препон для деятельности российского посольства, на что мы, естественно, отвечали взаимностью и создавали тоже некомфортные условия для работы американского посольства в Москве.
Such a meeting will take place tomorrow in Istanbul, and I think it will be clear from its results how quickly and efficiently we can move.
Мы можем двигаться быстро и эффективно.
How can you comment on the results of the elections in Germany? What are the expectations in politics in Russia?
You know, we have already made comments. Our ambassador in Berlin gave his assessments. We see changes in the internal political landscape of Germany, and again the division goes to the east and west of this country. The East is still more focused on solving internal problems that have significantly worsened due to Germany's thoughtless accession to anti-Russian sanctions, due to the fact that Germany turned tail after the explosions, after terrorist acts to undermine the gas pipeline to the northern streams, and shamefully wrapped up the investigation. Although this is what undermined the healthy foundations of the German economy, which allowed for many decades to be the leader of European development. This is their choice. I think the voters are beginning to understand better what is happening and who stands for what. And as for Mr. Merz specifically, he has specific approaches to Russia, unlike Chancellor Scholz. He insisted on sending long-range Taurus missiles to the Ukrainians for attacks deep into the territory of the Russian Federation. When the Germans are actively hatching such ideas, it brings back memories.
Когда немцы такие идеи активно вынашивают, это, конечно, наводит на воспоминания.
But first of all, it should bring back memories to the Germans themselves. But he recently said here that it is no longer possible to rely on the United States. They will certainly either remove their nuclear umbrella or will not use it. So it is necessary to reach a new agreement between Europeans within Europe, the European Union, about that. And NATO says that France and Britain, as two nuclear powers, will continue to provide a nuclear umbrella for Europe. As far as this brings the recovery of Russia in Europe closer, I think there is no need to even speculate here. So for now, Mr. Merz has quite such aggressive views. It often happens when a person turns from a candidate to a functioning political statesman, in this case into a chancellor. The views become more realistic. Let's see how it will happen if Mr. Merz takes the chair of the German chancellor. Thank you very much.